Minister Claire Coutinho, we say good morning to her because she is today. You're at the scene of whatever happened last night, where the dust-up happened at Salford in Manchester, Claire. Just looking at the papers, fiery Rishi, feisty Rishi. How do you think he did last night?
Well, I think that he did well because actually what Keir Starmer's tried to do in this election is skate through while saying sort of high-level statements without setting out any plans underneath. And whether it was on bringing the immigration numbers down, whether it was on the NHS, whether it was on the £2,000 of extra tax rises that Labour's policies would cost working families in this country, he simply could not answer. And this is a person who apparently, someone was saying that Starmer had been preparing for the debate since Sunday. And my concern is if he couldn't even prepare for a debate, how could he prepare to run the country?
Well, you see, he doesn't really have to do much preparation because you guys have given him the answer straight away. He's sort of saying, what are we going to do for this? Well, the answer is we're hardly going to do any worse than the Conservatives have done. And, you know, the things you can't say things like judges on a record because your record ain't very good.
Well, look, there's lots of things that I could talk about when it comes to the Conservative record. I could talk about the fact we've got the best readers in the Western world when it comes to our children. I could talk about the fact that we've got some of the lowest unemployment on record. I could talk about the fact that we fixed the £70 billion black hole in the defence budget that Labour left in 2010. But what Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak were talking about yesterday was the future. And actually what Keir Starmer couldn't do is he couldn't rule out the fact that his policies, as set out by the Labour Party, would cost families £2,000 in extra taxes. And he couldn't rule out the fact that pensioners for the first time under Labour plans would have to pay tax on their state pension next year. And actually that's the substance of what people are choosing between. And I really thought actually it was quite shocking that on all of those major issues, Keir Starmer was woolly. He didn't have any clear plans or proposals to address some of the challenges that the country is facing.
The Daily Telegraph agreeing with you. Starmer on the ropes over tax. The Times, Labour accused on tax as Sunak comes out fighting. So, you know, it's a big deficit to make up a 20-odd point deficit in the polls. And the Prime Minister, I suppose he has to come out fighting. That's what he has to do. Your area, energy. Keir Starmer was talking about that this week in Manchester, as it turned out. Where would you take exception with him on that?
Well, I mean, so many areas. And you look at Ed Miliband's plans for energy in this country, and all he would do is raise people's bills and raise taxes to pay for it. So the £2,000 of taxes on working families, the most expensive part of their policy plan is actually Ed Miliband's Green Plan, which they've said will cost £23.7 billion over the next parliament. Now, you could have a debate about that because I think we're severely underestimating that cost because they used to say it would cost £28 billion a year and have now watered down the price tag but kept all of the policy costs. But really, what I want to talk about is the principle, because ultimately, when it comes to the Conservatives, my priority is always going to be to make sure we can have cheaper energy and cheaper bills for people. So whether it's the tariff reforms, which can save people £900 a year, or standing charges or anything else, my priority is cheaper energy. Whereas that Ed Miliband's priority is to decarbonise further and faster than anybody else when it comes to major economies, no matter what the cost is for working families. And you could see that last night in the fact that Keir Starmer could not rule out that his proposals would mean this additional amount of £2,000 of taxes for families.
So the difference there, Claire, is that you would say you would be less green. I mean, you'd have to openly admit that you would not be green at the same pace as Labour would be going at it.
Well, nobody, like when you look at all of our peers in other countries around the world, nobody is going to do the pace that Labour and Ed Miliband want to do. And that's because of the enormous costs it would put on families in this country. So when it comes to clean energy, I would say our record is very strong. Nobody has built more offshore wind, for example, than us, bar China, anywhere in the world. We've done an enormous amount to bring energy into the system, but I'm always going to do that in a way which thinks about the costs to working families. And actually what you get with the Labour Party and Ed Miliband is this blind rush to go further and faster than anybody else, even if that would mean hiking up people's bills or their taxes.
Energy is a national issue. It affects us all, whatever part of the country that we're in. And if you're in the peripheries, in Northern Ireland, for instance, or Scotland, it may be more expensive. Now, a lot of that energy is produced in Scotland, and Scotland's leader, John Swinney, wasn't there at the debate last night. Now, he takes exception to that. He thinks he should have been there at the debate last night as the leader of the third biggest party in the country. What do you say?
Well, look, when it comes to July 4th, there's only two people who are going to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and that's Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. So if you vote for anybody else rather than the Conservatives, you're more likely to put Keir Starmer in charge. And that's why it's really important that we flush them out. And I think Labour and Keir were very exposed last night when it comes to major issues. Like I said, migration, the fact that Labour's plans means that state pensions for the first time next year will be taxed, whether it's the £2,000 of extra costs for working families, whether it was the NHS, on every single major issue that the country faced, they simply could not set out answers. And that is the choice that people are going to have to make on July 4th.